Hey everybody, Countdown VHS here with a bit of an update for Total War Wainriders. This is a mod for Rome Total War's Alexander expansion, and it is set in the very interesting period of time of the Wainrider invasions, many centuries before the events of the War of the Ring. But one of the most interesting areas of the map is actually not directly impacted by the Wainriders themselves, and that is the northwest, the region encompassing the lands of the former kingdom of Arnor. Now, in this northwestern region, the surviving Dunedainic faction, we initially settled on the name of Arthedain. And this is because, quite naturally, this was one of the three kingdoms that emerged after the dissolution of Arnor as a unified kingdom in the early centuries of the Third Age. You had Arthedain emerge in roughly the northwest of Arnor, Cardolan to the south, and Rudour to the east. But what complicates this picture a little bit is that at a certain point in history, Arthedain's kings no longer seemed to be content by calling themselves King of Arthedain. So if we look, for example, in Appendix A, we can find the lists of kings of the realms in exile. The northern line, the heirs of Isildur, is the section we're going to be most interested in here. We have three sections here that Tolkien has just lists of king names for Arnor, Arthedain, and the list of chieftains after the time of Arvedui, the last king, who died in 1974. The way these three king lists are organized led me, at any rate, to interpret the fact that by the point of our mod, starts around the 1860s in the Third Age, the kingdom of Arnor was over and done with, completely finished. After all, there's a list of kings of Arnor going up until the time of Eärendil in 861, and from there on we have kings of Arthedain up until the time of Arvedui. However, there is a footnote here associated with King Malvigil from 1349. The note says that after Malvigil, the kings at Fornost again claimed lordship over the whole of Arnor, and took names with the prefix ar or a in token of this. And this is repeated with slight elaboration a little further in the text, the North Kingdom and the Dunedain, still in Appendix A, where it says, "In the days of Argileb, son of Malvigil, since no descendants of Isildur remained in the other kingdoms, the kings of Arthedain again claimed the lordship of all Arnor." We read here that the claim was resisted by Rudour, but we hear nothing of Cardolan, except that later, Cardolan helped Arthedain to drive back their enemies from the hills. So the relationship between Arthedain and the lordship of Arnor, and whether any of the other kingdoms acceded to that lordship, is somewhat of an open question. And Tolkien does complicate this matter further by referring almost exclusively to Arthedain, even in its very last days, when its kings were ambitious enough to claim the lordship of Gondor. When we read about Arvedui, for example, Malbeth the seer claims, "Arvedui you shall call him, for he will be the last in Arthedain." And a little later in this text, Eärendil was a wise man and not arrogant, even if, as to most men in Gondor, the realm in Arthedain seemed a small thing for all the lineage of its lords. When in 1973 Eärnir reaches the havens of Lindon to lend Gondor's aid to the North Kingdom against the Witch King, we read in fact that the Witch King had conquered Arthedain, not Arnor. However, the precise language Tolkien uses around the name Arthedain in these passages may be of significance. Malbeth the seer, for example, says, "He will be the last in Arthedain," referring to Arvedui, the last king. This could be interpreted to mean that he is king in Arthedain, not only necessarily king of Arthedain. And it may not be a direct reference to the title that Arvedui at this point, as several kings before him, had been claiming. Similarly, the discussion of the realm in Arthedain uses that same kind of language. Does the realm refer to Arnor? Is in Arthedain referring to the geographical region primarily? It's a little hard to tease out. And in fact, in the famous passage in Appendix A, in which the Council of Gondor meets to discuss Arvedui's claim to the kingship of Gondor as well as that of Arnor, the name Arnor is used consistently. The council claims that the heritage of the king is reckoned through the sons only, and we have not heard that the law is otherwise in Arnor. Similarly, Eärendil sends messages to Arvedui, in which he states that he does not forget the loyalty of Arnor, implying that to those in Gondor at least, the kingdom in the north was thought of as Arnor. So as you can see, there's a bit of a conundrum here. This North Kingdom, as it begins in the period of our mod, is a relatively small thing. It comprises exactly the borders of the Kingdom of Arthedain, and yet its kings had, for centuries by this time, been claiming lordship of all of Arnor. While there is a certain degree of incongruity between their claim and the reality of the situation, that kind of incongruity has not stopped kings or rulers in the past from claiming titles far more grandiose and ostentatious than they actually possessed. And so after some discussion, we came to the conclusion as a team that indeed it would make sense for us to emphasize that incongruity by changing the name of the faction from Arthedain to Arnor. Of course, the player of this faction will have his work cut out for him. Threatened to the north and east by the Witch Realm of Angmar, to the south by potential hostile tribes, and having to deal with a relative lack of funds and manpower will make it difficult indeed to realize your ambitions as the ruler of Arnor. But since the Rome Total War engine does not allow changes to the faction names, I thought it might be good also to allow this as a sort of an aspirational title. In the event that you do conquer the realms of Cardolan and Rhudaur, then it certainly would be more satisfying to have Arnor be the name of your kingdom rather than to be forever saddled with the smaller title of King of Arthedain. Now, of course, the name of the faction is a relatively small thing, and there are going to be other ways that we can signal through the mod that you have achieved sort of a new level of prestige. One of those is likely to be traits. Those of you who have played Viking Invasion 2 may remember kingship traits, depending on different regions, that would change and expand as you conquered new territories. So we may use something similar here to give the player a feeling of progression if they manage to hold back against their foes and expand to truly claim the title King of Arnor. So if you have any suggestions or thoughts about this or anything else, leave a comment below or visit our Discord where we have some lively discussions around these same issues. Until the next video, everybody, take care.